you're at the market, you're exposed to all sorts of things, right? Whether it's just the regular whatever regular yearly flu, or it's just the common cold, or it's some sort of bacteria. We've all had that sense like, ooh, I feel like I'm getting sick, and then not gotten sick, right? And you're just kind of describing it, but some of this kind of tends to last longer, right? And hair loss is one of the things that came out of a lot of this, and really, when you think about hair loss, you think about maybe nails growing slower, or actually not growing, or not looking as healthy. They're kind of the last on the bottom rung of what your body needs to focus on. If your body's fighting something internally, it's like, well, the hair is for attractiveness. We just don't need to worry about that right now. We want to live first, and then you get that all organized, and then you're like, okay, let's go back to looking attractive. Like that's typically the approach. And we do get a lot of hair testimonials, and that's exactly what we think is going on, is that there's helping some fundamental underlying challenges, and then now that those are managed or mitigated, now we can have get back focused on the hair. So that's one. When you're talking about what is it, competitive displacement, right? I'm not familiar with that particular phrase. Like, it makes perfect sense, and is extremely applicable. Let's go back to 1991, right? That's actually when we started the lab and started manufacturing this molecule, way back in 1991. Um, Molecule was discovered in 85. They started making macroscopic quantities that we could actually hold and study, really in, it was probably 89, 89, 90. And then we started the company in 91. Pretty quickly, one of the things that they started doing, that was really at the peak of the AIDS epidemic.
Mm.
And so, just devastating disease, wiping out communities, whether it's overseas, like still a big problem in Africa, or whether it's here it's not that it targeted the gay community, that it just spread early in the gay community. And one of the things that came out pretty early is the presence of this ESS60 molecule would actually fit in one of the proteins necessary for the AIDS virus to replicate. And by fitting into that cup, basically, then it could no longer replicate. So it was actually defeating the AIDS virus. It was really early days. There are other kind of medicines that have come on the market, and are doing a really good job in that arena. Same thing with the spike protein, right? And so I think what you're saying is, whether you've decided to go mRNA in order to get exposure to the spike protein, or whether you're actually getting infected, you've got some exposure to that spike protein, and it turns out that there's some. I love the phrase. It's in silica studies, right? So you have in vivo, which means in a real live person, in vitro, which really means in a petri dish, and in silica means on a computer. So there's computer models that show that the ESS60 molecule fits in the same receptor of our cells that spike protein attaches to gain entry into the cells. And you're right, that competitive displacement, you can imagine if all of those receptors, by the way, probably not a good strategy, because those receptors also serve other purposes. But if all you can imagine, if all of those receptors were filled with an ESS60 molecule, then there's no way that spike protein could get into the cell, no way it could replicate from getting into that cell. So that competitive displacement, we do understand is plausible and possible, certainly from that kind of in silico study, which is I don't know, all of this stuff is pretty amazing.